Have you ever believed that moving to another state would turn you into a new person, only to realize you carried the same fears with you? In this video, I share my real journey of relocating, working, falling in love, and building a family in a new U.S. state. Together, we explore one big question: does place change identity? What I discovered might change how you see your own life. Leaving to find myself. Have you ever believed that moving to another state would turn you into a new person, only to realize you carried the same fears with you? If you're feeling stuck right now, tired, unmotivated, maybe even ready to quit something important, I understand that feeling more than you think. There was a time when I truly believed that if I just left my old state in the United States, everything would change. I would become more confident, more articulate, more successful. My English would suddenly sound smooth and natural. Most of all, I would finally become a different version of myself. But there is no magic waiting at a state border. The day I decided to move, I sat alone in my small apartment and stared at the window. I remember asking myself quietly, is this really who I am? It wasn't that my life was terrible. My job was stable. My routine was predictable. Nothing was falling apart. And yet, something inside me felt compressed, like I was living at 60% of my capacity. Psychologists sometimes describe this as functional dissatisfaction. You're functioning. You're surviving. But your internal motivation is slowly fading. Research in behavioral science shows that when we stay in the same environment for too long, the brain reduces novelty-related dopamine responses. In simple words, your brain stops feeling excited. You're not broken. You're just understimulated. So I made a decision that scared me. I moved to a different state. On paper, it was just a relocation for work. In my heart, it was an identity experiment. I moved states and found myself? Or was I just running away from discomfort? Here's what surprised me. In a new place, no one knows your past. No one knows the quiet version of you. No one knows the meetings where you didn't speak up. No one knows how many times you rewrote emails because you were afraid your English wasn't good enough. In that blank space, you get a strange opportunity. You can redefine how you show up. At my first meeting in the new office, my hands were slightly shaking. I told myself one simple sentence: just speak. Slow is fine. Not perfect. Not impressive. Just clear. I spoke slowly. I paused. I searched for words. But I didn't stop. No one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. In fact, one colleague said, "I like how clearly you explain things." My brain almost rejected the compliment. There's something fascinating about fear. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing threat, often exaggerates social danger. We imagine criticism much louder than it actually is. By changing environments, I accidentally interrupted the old mental scripts that defined me as the quiet one or the insecure one. Maybe I wasn't shy. Maybe I was just overfamiliar with a role I had been playing. But let me be honest, moving did not instantly transform me. The first nights in my new apartment were lonely. I sat on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet. I questioned my decision. I replayed conversations in my head. I still rewrote emails. I still doubted my pronunciation. The difference was subtle but powerful. In my old state, I used to think, maybe I'm just not confident. In the new state, I started thinking, maybe I just haven't practiced enough yet. Do you hear the difference? One is identity. The other is skill. Identity feels permanent. Skill feels trainable. That small mental shift changed how I approached everything, including English. I stopped labeling myself as bad at speaking. Instead, I started seeing communication as repetition plus exposure. When you live in an environment where you must use English every day, at work, at the grocery store, during small talk, you stop learning for perfection. You start learning for connection. And connection is far more powerful than correctness. If you're watching this to improve your listening and speaking, try something simple right now. Don't aim to understand every single word. Just follow the story. Let your brain absorb patterns. Studies in language acquisition suggest that comprehension grows faster when learners focus on meaning, not on constant self-correction. Moving states didn't magically create a new personality. But it forced me to confront something deeper. I had been confusing comfort with identity. Maybe the place doesn't change who you are. Maybe it changes which parts of you are activated. So here's the real question I began asking myself. When you move to a new place, will you keep carrying your old story, or will you allow yourself to write a new one? And my journey in that new state was only beginning. First days in a new state. Imagine stepping outside your apartment and realizing even the air feels unfamiliar. That was my first morning in the new state. The climate was completely different from where I had lived before. The air was drier. The sky looked wider. Even the sunlight felt sharper on my skin. It sounds dramatic, but climate quietly affects mood more than we admit. Studies in environmental psychology show that temperature, humidity, and sunlight exposure can influence energy levels, sleep patterns, and even social behavior. In my old state, the weather was mild and predictable. Here, it changed quickly. Cold mornings. Warm afternoons. Sudden wind. My body needed time to adjust. And when your body feels unsettled, your confidence often follows. You might not connect climate to identity, but think about it. If you wake up energized because the sunlight hits differently, you walk differently. You speak differently. You take more risks in conversations. The first week at work felt like stepping onto a moving treadmill. The pace was faster. People spoke quickly. Meetings started exactly on time and ended with clear action steps. There was less small talk, more direct communication. At first, I felt behind. I listened more than I spoke. Have you ever been in a room where everyone seems fluent, not just in language, but in cultural rhythm? That was me. I understood the English words, but I didn't always understand the tone. Humor was drier. Feedback was more straightforward. In my previous state, people softened criticism. Here, comments were concise and efficient. This needs revision. Let's tighten this up. No emotional cushioning. At first, my brain interpreted directness as rejection. But then I started observing patterns. No one took feedback personally. It was normal. It was part of the workflow. This is something powerful about relocation. You begin to see that what you once thought was personality might actually be regional culture. In one state, being quiet might seem respectful. In another, it might seem disengaged. So I experimented. Instead of waiting to be invited into discussions, I prepared one clear sentence before each meeting. Just one. I would tell myself, contribute once. That was it. Not a speech. Not a perfect paragraph. One useful idea. And here's what happened. The more I contributed, the more natural it felt. My English didn't suddenly improve overnight. But my willingness did. There's a psychological principle called exposure effect. The more frequently you engage with something slightly uncomfortable, the less threatening it becomes. The first time I spoke up, my heart was racing. By the 10th time, it felt routine. Your nervous system adapts faster than your doubts do. Outside of work, daily life was also different. Grocery stores had different brands. Neighbors greeted each other in a slightly different way. Even the driving style changed. In my previous state, drivers were more relaxed. Here, they were assertive. Faster decisions. Faster merges. At first, I thought, maybe I'm not bold enough for this place. But then I realized something important. Environments reward different traits. The same person can feel timid in one setting and confident in another. One evening, I was sitting alone in my new apartment, exhausted from trying to adjust. I asked myself quietly, am I becoming someone else? The honest answer was no. I wasn't becoming someone else. I was activating parts of myself that had been dormant. In the old state, my cautious side was useful. In this new state, decisiveness was more valuable. So my behavior shifted. Not because my identity changed, but because the environment pulled out different strengths. This realization changed how I viewed language learning too. When you practice English only in a classroom, you activate your analytical side. Grammar, structure, correction. But when you use English in real conversations, you activate spontaneity, intuition, emotional intelligence. Different settings awaken different versions of you. If you're watching this and feeling frustrated with your progress, ask yourself, are you practicing in an environment that challenges you just enough? Growth rarely happens in total comfort. During those early weeks, I kept a small notebook. Every day, I wrote one sentence in English about something I noticed. People are more direct here. The mornings feel colder but clearer. I spoke once in the meeting today. Small observations. Simple sentences. But they grounded me. They reminded me that I was not lost. I was adapting. Climate shifted my routine. Work culture shifted my communication style. Daily life shifted my pace. But something deeper was shifting too. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove who I had been. I was curious about who I could become. And that curiosity, that small, quiet curiosity, felt more powerful than confidence. Maybe identity doesn't break when you move. Maybe it stretches. And in that stretching, you discover dimensions you didn't know existed. But the real test of identity wasn't climate or work. It was loneliness. Lonely in a crowded city. Loneliness in a new state doesn't arrive loudly. It shows up quietly, usually at night. During the day, I was busy. New job. New systems. New expectations. My brain had tasks to focus on. But when evening came, the silence felt heavier than the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. Have you ever been surrounded by millions of people and still felt invisible? The city was alive. Restaurants were full. Traffic lights blinked endlessly. People walked confidently, as if they had always belonged there. And then there was me, standing in line at a grocery store, rehearsing simple sentences in my head before speaking. Paper or plastic? Credit or debit? Small questions. Small answers. But when you're adjusting to a new environment, even small interactions feel like performance. Loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's about lacking emotional mirrors. In your old state, people knew your history. They knew your jokes. They understood your tone. In a new place, you are contextless. And when you lose context, you start questioning your identity. One Friday evening, I walked home after work instead of taking the bus. I wanted to feel the city. I passed by groups of friends laughing outside bars. Couples holding hands. Families walking dogs. For a moment, I wondered, did I make a mistake? This is the psychological turning point many people don't talk about when they move. The excitement phase fades. Reality settles in. Researchers studying relocation stress describe it as the adjustment dip. Motivation drops. Doubt rises. Nostalgia becomes selective and romanticized. Suddenly, your old life seems perfect, even if it wasn't. I almost convinced myself that moving states had been a dramatic overreaction. Maybe I should have just stayed. Maybe identity doesn't change. Maybe I had disrupted a stable life for nothing. But then something subtle happened. The loneliness forced me to face myself without distraction. In my previous state, I filled empty evenings with familiar routines, same cafe, same friends, same conversations. In the new state, I didn't have automatic plans. I had time. And time can be uncomfortable. So I started using that time intentionally. Every night, I practiced speaking out loud for 10 minutes. Not complicated speeches. Just retelling my day in simple English. Today was busy. I felt nervous in the meeting. The weather was colder than yesterday. Why out loud? Because language is physical. When you speak, your brain coordinates breath, muscle movement, sound production, and memory retrieval. Research in cognitive science shows that speaking activates deeper neural pathways than silent reading alone. It builds confidence through repetition. At first, I felt silly. Talking to myself in an empty apartment. But slowly, something shifted. The silence stopped feeling like rejection. It started feeling like rehearsal. Loneliness became training. There's a concept in psychology called self-authorship. It describes the process of defining your beliefs and identity from within, instead of relying on external validation. In a new state, you have fewer external references. That can feel scary, but it can also be liberating. No one expected me to behave a certain way. No one reminded me who I used to be. So I asked myself new questions. Who am I when no one is watching? Who do I want to become in this place? If no one here knows my past limitations, do I still need to carry them? One Sunday morning, instead of staying home, I visited a local community event. I almost didn't go. My mind produced every excuse. You'll feel awkward. You won't know what to say. Your English isn't smooth enough. But I went anyway. I introduced myself simply. Hi, I just moved here. That sentence became my bridge. People were curious. They asked where I was from, why I moved, what I did for work. The conversations weren't perfect. I searched for words. I paused. But I connected. And connection, even brief connection, weakens loneliness dramatically. Studies show that even short positive social interactions can increase feelings of belonging and reduce stress hormones. That night, walking back to my apartment, something felt different. The city didn't seem as intimidating. I realized loneliness wasn't proof that I didn't belong. It was a transitional space between who I was and who I was becoming. When you move states, you lose automatic belonging. But you gain the chance to build intentional belonging. That's a powerful trade. Did the place change my identity? Not yet. But it stripped away distractions. It forced me to confront my fears. It made me practice communication not for grades, not for approval, but for connection. And in that quiet apartment, speaking simple English sentences to myself, I wasn't just improving a language. I was rebuilding confidence. Still, I didn't know that the most transformative part of this journey wasn't climate, work, or loneliness. It was a person I was about to meet. The meeting that changed everything. Sometimes the biggest turning point in your life doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary. I met her on a Tuesday. Not at a party. Not through friends. Not in some cinematic moment under perfect lighting. It was at a professional networking event I almost skipped. I remember standing near the coffee table, pretending to read a name tag just to avoid awkward eye contact. Then she said, "Hi, is this your first event here?" Simple sentence. Clear voice. Friendly smile. I answered, "Yes, I just moved to this state." That line had become my safety sentence. My introduction. My identity summary. She didn't react with surprise or over-politeness. She just nodded and said, "That's brave." Brave. No one had used that word to describe my move before. Most people said exciting or stressful. But brave? That word stayed with me. We started talking. Slowly at first. She asked about my job. I asked about hers. I noticed something immediately. Her communication style reflected this state's culture, direct but warm. Efficient but not cold. I was still careful with my words. I paused sometimes to search for vocabulary. But instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt curious. I wanted to stay in the conversation. Not to impress her, but to connect. There's a powerful psychological phenomenon called social resonance. When two people feel emotionally safe in conversation, their nervous systems begin to synchronize. Heart rates slow. Muscles relax. Language flows more naturally. That evening, my English felt different. Not perfect. Not advanced. But alive. When you speak with someone who listens without judgment, your brain shifts from threat mode to growth mode. Cortisol decreases. Cognitive flexibility increases. In simple words, you think more clearly. We talked for almost an hour. About work. About why people move. About how climate affects mood. She laughed when I said I still wasn't used to how dry the air felt. "You'll adjust," she said. "This place grows on you." That sentence felt symbolic. This place grows on you. After the event, we exchanged numbers. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple, "Let's grab coffee sometime." On the walk home, I noticed something subtle but powerful. For the first time since moving, I wasn't analyzing my performance. I wasn't replaying my sentences to check for grammar mistakes. I wasn't criticizing my accent. I was replaying moments of connection. That shift matters. When you focus on connection instead of correctness, your identity starts to reorganize around relationships instead of fear. Our first coffee meeting happened a few days later. It was casual. Daytime. Sunlight through large windows. We talked about our families. Our childhood memories. The states we had lived in before. She told me she had also moved across states earlier in her life. Every time I moved, she said, I thought I was becoming someone new. But really, I was just discovering parts of myself I hadn't needed before. That sentence hit me. Discovering parts of myself I hadn't needed before. Maybe identity isn't replaced when you relocate. Maybe it expands. As we continued seeing each other, I became more aware of regional differences, not just in climate or workplace culture, but in emotional expression. Her family traditions were slightly different from mine. Holiday expectations. Communication styles. Even how conflicts were handled. In my previous state, disagreements were often indirect. Here, discussions were clearer, sometimes more intense, but resolved faster. At first, that directness intimidated me. But she explained something simple: clarity is kindness. Clarity is kindness. I had spent years softening my words to avoid tension. Now I was learning that expressing needs clearly could actually strengthen relationships. This wasn't just a romantic connection. It was a cultural education. Through her, I began to see the state not as an outsider, but as someone being invited in. And slowly, my sense of belonging shifted. We started building routines. Weekend walks. Shared dinners. Conversations about long-term goals. I told her about my doubts when I first moved. About the loneliness. About questioning my identity. She listened carefully and said something I will never forget. You didn't move to change who you are. You moved to stop hiding who you are. That sentence felt like a mirror. Was that true? Had I been hiding in comfort before? Love has a way of accelerating self-awareness. When someone sees you clearly, you're forced to confront your own narratives. With her, I practiced speaking more openly. Not just English, but emotions. I feel unsure. I'm afraid of failing. I want to grow. Those simple sentences built something deeper than fluency. They built trust. Did moving states change my identity? Not directly. But meeting her revealed parts of me that the old environment had never required. And for the first time, the question wasn't just about geography anymore. It was about partnership. And partnership would test my identity more than any relocation ever could. The breaking point, when I almost gave up on my marriage, my career, and myself. If you've ever searched starting over in a new state, marriage struggles after relocation, or even does moving change who you are, you probably weren't just looking for logistics. You were looking for hope. I know that because I was there too. About 6 months after moving to a new state in the United States, the excitement wore off. The fresh start energy faded. What replaced it was pressure, quiet, heavy, constant pressure. At work, I was the new person again. New systems. New expectations. New personalities to decode. I had moved for a better opportunity, a higher salary, and a chance to grow professionally. On paper, it was a smart decision. But emotionally? It felt like I had walked into a room where everyone else had the rulebook except me. Even though I speak English fluently, I started overthinking everything. In meetings, I would rehearse my sentences in my head before speaking. If someone interrupted me, I'd immediately question whether I sounded confident enough. After presentations, I would replay every word I said, analyzing tone, grammar, facial expressions, everything. That's the part people don't talk about when they discuss relocating to another state in America. It's not just about cost of living, housing markets, or job growth. It's about identity. When you move, you lose the version of yourself that was established. You become a beginner again. And that beginner stage can feel humiliating. At home, things weren't easier. Relocating affects marriage in ways I didn't expect. When you're both adjusting to a new environment, small disagreements feel bigger. We argued about budgeting because expenses were different in this state. We argued about time because work demanded more from both of us. We even argued about who had sacrificed more for the move. There were nights when we sat in the same room but felt miles apart. I remember one particular evening. We had just had another tense conversation about finances and career priorities. I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She looked tired, defensive, on edge. And for the first time, I asked myself a dangerous question. Was this move a mistake? Not just the state. Not just the job. But everything. It's easy to think that changing your location will automatically change your life. We see success stories all the time. People who move to Texas for opportunity, to California for dreams, to New York for ambition, to Florida for a fresh start. Social media shows the highlight reel, new houses, new promotions, new friends. But no one posts the breakdown moments. No one records the quiet car rides after arguments. No one captions the anxiety before a performance review. That season forced me to confront something uncomfortable. I had tied my identity to external stability. I thought if my environment was impressive enough, I would feel secure. If my job title was strong enough, I would feel worthy. If my marriage looked happy enough, I would feel fulfilled. But a new state cannot fix internal insecurities. In fact, it exposes them. Relocating stripped away my old support system. I didn't have childhood friends nearby. I didn't have familiar routines. I didn't even have my favorite grocery store or cafe. Everything required effort. Everything required adjustment. And when you're constantly adjusting, you get tired. That's when resentment can sneak in, toward your partner, your job, even yourself. One night, instead of arguing, we finally talked. Not about logistics. Not about money. But about fear. My husband admitted he felt pressure to succeed because the move had been partly his idea. I admitted I felt invisible and uncertain in my new workplace. We weren't actually fighting each other. We were fighting our own insecurity. That conversation didn't magically fix everything. But it shifted something important. We stopped asking, who is to blame, and started asking, how do we grow through this? That was the turning point. I began to redefine what success meant in this new state. Instead of trying to prove myself immediately, I focused on learning. Instead of aiming to sound perfect in every meeting, I aimed to be clear and authentic. Instead of comparing our marriage to others, we started building private rituals, weekly check-ins, honest conversations, small celebrations. Slowly, I realized something powerful. Moving to a new state didn't change my identity overnight. But it forced me to choose who I wanted to become. Growth is uncomfortable. Marriage under pressure is uncomfortable. Starting over in a new job in America is uncomfortable. But discomfort is not the same as failure. If you're watching this because you're exhausted, questioning your move, or wondering whether you made the wrong decision, pause. Feeling lost after relocation is normal. Struggling in marriage during a big transition is normal. Doubting yourself in a new professional environment is normal. What matters is what you do next. For me, the breaking point became a rebuilding point. Not because everything got easier, but because I stopped expecting geography to save me. Place doesn't create identity. It reveals it. And sometimes, the state you move to isn't just a new location on the map. It's the place where you finally confront the strongest and weakest parts of yourself. That's where the real transformation begins. Rebuilding from the inside. How I found confidence after moving to a new state. After the breaking point, nothing changed overnight. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no sudden promotion, no perfect marriage moment that fixed everything. What changed was quieter than that. It started inside me. If you've ever relocated to a new state in the US and felt lost, you know this feeling. You wake up one day and realize you can't keep surviving on stress. You can't keep proving your worth every hour. You can't keep waiting for the new zip code to magically hand you a new identity. That realization became my reset. Instead of asking, "Why isn't this place making me happier?" I started asking, "Who am I becoming here?" That shift changed everything. Redefining success in a new state. When people move states for career growth, better opportunities, or a fresh start, success is usually measured in visible milestones: salary, job title, house, social circle. I was no different. I had tied my confidence to external achievements. But living and working in a different state forced me to face something deeper. My insecurity wasn't about geography. It was about comparison. I compared my new self to my old self, the confident employee who knew everyone, understood office culture, and had a reputation. In this new environment, I felt invisible again. Like I had pressed reset on my identity. So I made a decision. Instead of trying to recreate who I used to be, I would build a stronger version. I began focusing on small wins at work. Contributing one clear idea in meetings. Building one genuine connection with a colleague. Learning one new system each week. These actions sound simple, but consistency builds confidence. If you're navigating career change after relocation, here's what I learned. Confidence doesn't come from location. It comes from evidence. And evidence is built daily. Strengthening marriage during relocation stress. Relocating can test even the healthiest marriages. When you move to a different state, routines disappear. Support systems shrink. Financial pressures increase. Career demands expand. All of that stress has to go somewhere. For us, it initially turned into tension. But after our honest conversation in the previous chapter, we started rebuilding intentionally. We created structure in the middle of uncertainty. Every Sunday evening, we had what we called a reset talk. Not a complaint session. Not a blame discussion. A reset. We would ask, what felt heavy this week? What felt good? How can we support each other better next week? That weekly ritual became an anchor. If you're searching for how to strengthen marriage after moving or relationship advice after relocation, here's the truth. You cannot control the stress of a new environment, but you can control how you face it together. We stopped competing over who sacrificed more. We started acknowledging that we were both adjusting. That mindset alone reduced so much resentment. Building a new identity in America. Living in a new state also challenged my sense of belonging. Even though I had already been in the United States, this state felt culturally different. The communication style was different. The pace of life was different. Even the values felt slightly different. At first, I tried to adapt completely, to blend in, to match the tone, to adjust my personality. But over time, I realized something powerful. adaptation does not require erasing yourself. Instead of hiding my background, I started sharing more of my story at work. Instead of softening my voice to avoid standing out, I focused on speaking with clarity. Instead of chasing approval, I focused on contribution. That's when something shifted. People responded not to perfection, but to authenticity. If you're building a life in a new state in America, especially as someone navigating cultural or professional transitions, remember this: belonging is not about becoming identical. It's about being valuable as you are. Emotional resilience after moving. There were still hard days. Relocation stress doesn't disappear just because you decide to be stronger. Some mornings I still felt behind. Some evenings I still questioned myself. But now, instead of spiraling, I paused. I started journaling regularly, documenting fears, small victories, frustrations. I tracked progress, not perfection. I paid attention to patterns. When I felt anxious before meetings, I prepared differently. When I felt disconnected in my marriage, I initiated conversation instead of withdrawing. Resilience is not about eliminating discomfort. It's about responding to discomfort differently. Moving to another state didn't automatically change my identity. But it gave me the environment to practice courage daily. And courage compounds. What I discovered about identity and place. So, does place change identity? After everything, career uncertainty, marriage tension, emotional doubt, I've realized this. Place amplifies who you already are. If you avoid conflict, relocation will magnify that avoidance. If you are ambitious, relocation will stretch that ambition. If you are insecure, relocation will expose it. If you are resilient, relocation will strengthen it. The state didn't transform me. The challenges did. And I had a choice: resist growth or participate in it. I chose participation. For anyone thinking about moving states, if you're considering relocating for work, marriage, opportunity, or simply a fresh start, don't expect the map to fix your mindset. Don't expect a new address to erase old doubts. But do expect growth. Expect discomfort. Expect self-discovery. Expect your marriage to be tested and strengthened. Expect your confidence to be shaken and rebuilt. Because sometimes, the best thing about moving to a new state in the U.S. isn't the opportunity itself. It's the version of you that emerges when you stop running from yourself. And in my case, that version was stronger, calmer, and more grounded than the one who packed those boxes months earlier. Not because the state changed me, but because I finally decided to change within it. Finding belonging, how I built a new life, community, and confidence in a different state. After rebuilding from the inside, I realized something important. Healing privately is powerful, but building connection publicly is transformational. Moving to a new state in the United States can feel isolating, even when everything looks successful from the outside. You may have the job. You may have the apartment or house. You may even have a supportive spouse. But without community, it can still feel empty. For months, my world was small. Work. Home. Repeat. And while stability is comforting, isolation is dangerous. Especially after relocation. If you've ever Googled how to make friends after moving to a new state or feeling lonely after relocation, you know this struggle is real. Adult friendships don't form the same way they did in school. There's no automatic shared schedule. No built-in circle. You have to be intentional. Stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm naturally introverted. Starting conversations with strangers drains me. But I knew that if I didn't make the effort, this new state would always feel temporary, like a place I was surviving in, not living in. So I made a rule: say yes more often. When a coworker invited me to a small gathering, I went even though I felt awkward. When I saw a local professional networking event, I registered even though I was nervous. When a neighbor smiled and started small talk, I didn't rush the conversation. These moments weren't dramatic. But they were consistent. Building a new life after moving isn't about one big breakthrough. It's about small repeated exposure to discomfort. Slowly, faces became familiar. Conversations became easier. I began recognizing names at the grocery store, at the gym, at community events. That sense of recognition, of being seen, started to anchor me. Creating stability in marriage while building community. One fear I had during this process was imbalance. I didn't want to build a new social world and unintentionally drift from my marriage. Relocation can sometimes push couples into separate coping mechanisms. One partner builds external connections, while the other withdraws. So we made a conscious choice: grow individually, but connect intentionally. We attended a few events together. We hosted a simple dinner at our place, even though our apartment wasn't perfect. That dinner mattered more than I expected. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about planting roots. If you're rebuilding marriage after moving to a new state, shared experiences are essential. Not just survival conversations about bills and work, but new memories. The more we built community together, the more united we felt. Professional growth and reputation in a new state. As my confidence grew socially, something interesting happened professionally. At work, I stopped overthinking every interaction. I started volunteering for projects that aligned with my strengths. I stopped trying to mirror everyone else's communication style and leaned into clarity and preparation. And people noticed. When you relocate for career opportunities, it's tempting to prove yourself immediately. But reputation in a new state is built through reliability, not speed. Consistency changed how others perceived me. More importantly, it changed how I perceived myself. Instead of thinking, I'm the new person who doesn't belong, I began thinking, I'm the new person who contributes. That mental shift is powerful. If you're navigating career growth after moving states, remember this: belonging at work doesn't come from perfection. It comes from participation. The emotional turning point. There was a moment, about a year after we moved, when I realized something had shifted deeply. I was driving home from work, windows down, music playing. The streets no longer felt foreign. The skyline didn't intimidate me. I wasn't counting the months since we moved anymore. This state, once overwhelming, felt familiar. Not because it changed, but because I did. Identity isn't replaced when you move. It expands. The version of me who arrived here was anxious, defensive, and constantly evaluating whether the decision was right. The version of me driving home that evening felt grounded. Still ambitious. Still imperfect. But grounded. Does place change identity? If you followed this journey from the beginning, you know this question has been central. Does place change identity? Here's what I've learned after relocating, rebuilding my marriage, restarting my career, and forming new friendships. Place doesn't change your core identity, but it creates conditions that reveal it. In a new state, you see your fears faster. You see your habits more clearly. You see your strengths under pressure. You cannot hide behind familiarity. And that exposure can feel terrifying. But it can also feel freeing. Because once you stop expecting geography to transform you, you take ownership of your growth. For anyone feeling lost after moving. If you're watching this because you moved states for a job, for love, for opportunity, or because you had no choice, and you're questioning yourself, I want you to hear this clearly. It's normal to feel disconnected. It's normal to miss your old life. It's normal to struggle in your marriage during transition. It's normal to doubt your decision. What's not permanent is that doubt. Building a life in a new state in America takes time. Building confidence takes repetition. Building belonging takes courage. But it is possible. 1 year ago, I wondered if we had made a mistake. Today, I see that we made a decision that forced us to grow. And growth, even when painful, is rarely wasted. So if you're on the edge of giving up, on your move, your career, or even your relationship, pause. The state you're in right now may not be changing you the way you expected. But it might be shaping you into someone stronger than you imagined. When the new state finally felt like home, identity, stability, and a deeper kind of confidence. There's a moment that doesn't get talked about enough in relocation stories. It's not the moving day. It's not the first promotion. It's not the first big purchase. It's the quiet day when you realize you're no longer counting how long you've been here. That's when I knew something had shifted. About 18 months after moving to this new state, I stopped introducing myself as someone who just moved. I stopped explaining my timeline. I stopped mentally comparing everything to where I used to live. For the first time, this place felt less like a temporary chapter and more like part of my identity. If you're searching for how long does it take to adjust after moving to a new state, or when does relocation feel normal, the answer isn't a number. It's a mindset shift. From survival mode to stability. In the beginning, I was in survival mode. Every task required extra energy, finding doctors, understanding local systems, navigating new workplace expectations, learning different social dynamics. Even simple things like traffic patterns or grocery store layouts felt overwhelming. Survival mode is exhausting. But slowly, routine replaced uncertainty. I found my favorite coffee shop. I memorized shortcuts on my commute. I built professional rhythm at work. I knew which months were busiest and which weeks were slower. Predictability began to reduce anxiety. And stability creates space for reflection. When you're not constantly reacting, you can start asking deeper questions. Who am I becoming here? What do I want long term? What kind of marriage are we building? Relocation forces you to rebuild logistics first. But once logistics settle, identity work begins. Career growth in a new state, from proving to leading. One of the biggest changes happened professionally. During my first year, my focus was proving myself. I wanted validation. I wanted reassurance that hiring me had been the right decision. I wanted to show that moving states for this opportunity was worth it. But by the second year, something changed. Instead of proving, I started leading. Not in title necessarily, but in presence. I mentored a newer colleague. I contributed ideas without rehearsing them 10 times. I asked strategic questions instead of just operational ones. My confidence didn't come from external praise anymore. It came from internal clarity. If you're navigating career relocation in the U.S., understand this. The first phase is adaptation. The second phase is ownership. Ownership feels different. It's calmer. Less desperate. More grounded. And that grounding impacts every area of life. Marriage after relocation, stronger, not just stable. Relocating tests a relationship. But surviving relocation strengthens it in ways comfort never could. By this stage, our arguments looked different. We weren't fighting about the move anymore. We weren't blaming stress on geography. We were building future plans. We talked about long-term goals. Home ownership. Career trajectories. Family planning. Community involvement. The move that once felt risky became foundational. And here's something powerful I realized. Shared adversity creates shared identity. Our marriage wasn't just existing in a new state. It was shaped by this transition. We had faced uncertainty together. We had questioned everything together. We had rebuilt trust and communication intentionally. If you're struggling with marriage after moving states, don't assume tension means failure. Sometimes tension is growth in progress. Identity beyond geography. So, does place change identity? After nearly 2 years, here's my honest answer. Place doesn't change who you are at your core, but it changes what you're capable of. Before moving, I thought confidence came from familiarity. From knowing the streets, the people, the systems. I thought stability came from external control. But this new state taught me something deeper. Stability is internal. When you relocate, you strip away comfort layers. You see how you handle stress. How you communicate under pressure. How you define success when no one knows your history. That exposure is uncomfortable. But it's clarifying. I discovered that my identity isn't tied to a specific city or state. It's tied to values, resilience, growth, honesty, partnership. And those values travel with me. The emotional piece I didn't expect. There was a Saturday morning that stands out in my memory. We were sitting at our kitchen table, no special occasion. Sunlight coming through the window. Coffee cups half full. No urgent plans. And I felt peaceful. Not excited. Not anxious. Not proving anything. Just present. That feeling mattered more than any milestone. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't trying to escape my past self anymore. I wasn't trying to become someone new. I had integrated who I was with who I was becoming. That's the real transformation. For anyone considering moving states. If you're thinking about relocating for work, for love, or for personal growth, know this. The first phase will challenge you. The second phase will stretch you. The third phase will ground you. Moving to a new state in America won't instantly fix insecurity. It won't automatically strengthen your marriage. It won't magically clarify your purpose. But it will give you the opportunity to confront all of those things. And if you're willing to stay, mentally and emotionally, you'll grow. Not because the state changed you, but because you allowed yourself to evolve within it. Today, when someone asks where I'm from, I still mention my roots. But I also proudly name this state. Not because it replaced my identity, but because it helped refine it. And that, more than any address change, is what truly feels like home. The hidden lessons of moving states, what no one tells you about identity, marriage, and starting over. By the time we crossed the 2-year mark in our new state, something surprising happened. The move was no longer the main character in my story. It had become the setting. That shift changed how I understood everything: career growth, marriage after relocation, personal identity, and what it really means to find yourself in a new place. If you're watching this because you're thinking about moving to another state in the US, or you already did and you're questioning your decision, this part matters. Because the biggest lessons didn't come from success. They came from discomfort. Lesson 1. Moving states exposes your emotional patterns. When you relocate, your coping mechanisms show up immediately. If you tend to overwork when you're stressed, you'll overwork even more in a new job. If you avoid difficult conversations, relocation stress will magnify that avoidance in your marriage. If you seek validation externally, starting over professionally will intensify that need. In my case, I realized I equated productivity with worth. So when I felt uncertain in my new role, I worked longer hours. I tried to outperform everyone. I said yes to everything. But exhaustion isn't confidence. Relocating to a new state forced me to see that I was chasing approval, not growth. Once I recognized that pattern, I began setting boundaries. I focused on impact instead of volume. I stopped measuring my value by how busy I looked. That awareness alone changed my professional trajectory. If you're navigating career relocation in America, pay attention to your patterns. A new state doesn't erase them, it highlights them. Lesson 2. Marriage after moving requires reinvention. A lot of couples underestimate how deeply relocation affects relationship dynamics. When you move, roles shift. One partner may adapt faster socially. One may struggle professionally. One may carry more emotional weight. That imbalance can create quiet resentment. We experienced that. There were seasons when I felt I was carrying more emotional labor. There were seasons when my spouse felt the financial pressure more heavily. Instead of assuming we were failing, we started asking better questions. What does support look like right now? What are we each afraid of? Are we reacting to the present or projecting past fears? Those conversations were uncomfortable. But they were necessary. Marriage in a new state is not about recreating your old routine. It's about designing a new one. If you're searching how to save marriage after relocation or relationship stress after moving states, understand this: the move isn't the enemy. Silence is. Communication is survival. And reinvention can be bonding. Lesson 3. Belonging is built, not found. In the beginning, I kept waiting to feel at home. I thought belonging would arrive like a moment, clear and emotional. But belonging is not discovered. It's constructed. It's built through repeated presence. Showing up to the same places. Engaging with the same people. Investing in the same community. It took time before I had inside jokes with coworkers. It took effort before neighbors recognized us. It took vulnerability before friendships deepened. Relocating to a new state in the U.S. requires social patience. If you're feeling lonely after moving, that loneliness doesn't mean you chose the wrong place. It means you're in the building phase. And building takes time. Lesson 4. Identity is more portable than you think. Before the move, I secretly believed my confidence was tied to familiarity. I thought I was strong because I knew my environment. But after starting over, I realized something liberating. My resilience traveled with me. Even when I felt insecure, I still showed up. Even when I doubted myself, I still learned. Even when my marriage felt stretched, we still chose conversation over avoidance. Identity is not attached to a state line. When people ask, "Does moving change who you are?" I now answer differently than I would have at the beginning. Moving doesn't change your core. It tests it. It stretches it. It clarifies it. And clarity is powerful. Lesson 5. You don't have to justify your growth. In the first year, I constantly defended our decision to move. If someone questioned it, I felt the need to prove it was worth it. If I had a hard week, I interpreted it as evidence that maybe we had been wrong. Now, I don't operate from defense. Growth doesn't require justification. Relocating for career opportunities, for marriage, or for personal development is a risk. And risk always carries uncertainty. But uncertainty is not regret. If you're in a season of doubt after moving states, give yourself permission to grow without constantly evaluating the decision. You don't need immediate results to validate your courage. The bigger realization. Looking back, the move wasn't about geography at all. It was about identity expansion. I am not the same person who packed those boxes. But I'm also not a completely different person. I'm integrated. Stronger because I faced insecurity. Closer in my marriage because we navigated tension honestly. More grounded professionally because I built credibility from zero. And that integration feels more powerful than reinvention ever could. For anyone standing at a crossroad. If you're considering moving to another state in America, or you're already there feeling uncertain, here's what I wish someone had told me. The first year will test you. The second year will shape you. The third year will reveal you. Not because the place changes you overnight, but because sustained discomfort creates depth. So if you're tired, questioning your identity, or wondering if relocation was a mistake, pause. Ask yourself not, did this place change me? But, what is this place teaching me? Because sometimes, the most important part of moving states isn't the new job, the new house, or even the new community. It's the moment you realize that who you are is not dependent on where you stand. And that realization? That's freedom. Full circle, looking back at the move that changed everything, without changing me. There's something powerful about looking back at a decision that once terrified you, and realizing it shaped you in ways you never expected. When I think about the day we packed up and moved to a different state in the United States, I remember the mix of excitement and fear. I told myself this relocation would unlock a better career, a stronger marriage, and a clearer sense of identity. What I didn't know then was this: moving states wouldn't magically change my life. It would refine it. If you're watching this because you're considering relocating for career growth, marriage, or a fresh start, this chapter is for you. Because what happens after the adjustment phase is where the real transformation begins. The career I built from scratch. When I first arrived, I felt like a beginner again. New workplace culture. New expectations. New professional relationships. I questioned my communication skills. I questioned my value. I questioned whether leaving my old position had been a mistake. But now, looking back, I see how critical that discomfort was. Starting over in a new state forced me to sharpen my skills. I became more intentional with how I prepared for meetings. I listened more closely. I stopped relying on familiarity and started relying on competence. Over time, opportunities expanded. Not because I demanded recognition, but because I demonstrated consistency. If you're navigating career relocation in America, here's what I've learned. Reputation built from zero is stronger than reputation inherited from comfort. There's confidence in knowing you earned your place without shortcuts. And that confidence stays with you, no matter where you move next. The marriage that grew through pressure. Relocating tested our relationship in ways we didn't anticipate. Stress magnified small disagreements. Financial adjustments created tension. Emotional exhaustion made communication harder. But pressure also clarified priorities. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, we learned to initiate them. Instead of assuming intent, we began asking for clarity. Instead of competing over who sacrificed more, we started acknowledging each other's efforts. Marriage after moving states is not about perfection. It's about adaptability. Looking back, I see that our relationship became more mature in this new environment. We stopped relying on old routines and started building intentional ones. We developed conflict resolution skills we didn't need before. We created emotional safety during uncertain seasons. We learned how to be teammates under stress. And that kind of growth doesn't disappear. If you're struggling with marriage after relocation, don't interpret tension as failure. Sometimes relocation exposes cracks so you can reinforce them. Identity, the question that started it all. At the beginning of this journey, I kept asking myself one central question. Does place change identity? I believed that moving to a new state would help me find myself. That somehow a new environment would automatically make me more confident, more successful, more fulfilled. Now I understand something deeper. Place doesn't create identity. It reveals it. When you move, you remove external comfort. You strip away familiarity. You lose the version of yourself that was supported by routine and recognition. What's left is your core. And your core either strengthens or hides. In my case, relocation forced me to confront insecurity, comparison, and fear. But it also revealed resilience, discipline, and courage. The state didn't transform me into someone else. It refined who I already was. The unexpected peace. There's a quiet confidence that comes from surviving your own doubts. 2 years ago, I questioned whether we had made the right decision. Today, I don't need constant reassurance. I don't analyze every setback as evidence of failure. I don't tie my identity to a single job title or zip code. That peace is internal. If you're adjusting to life in a new state in the U.S., understand this: peace doesn't come from external perfection. It comes from alignment. Alignment between your actions and your values. Alignment between your marriage and your intentions. Alignment between your career and your growth goals. Once that alignment settles, geography becomes secondary. For anyone afraid to take the leap. If you're standing at the edge of a big decision, moving states for work, relocating for love, or starting over after burnout, I want to speak directly to you. You will feel uncertain. You will question yourself. You will miss your old life. But you will also grow. Relocating to a new state in America is not just a logistical decision. It's an identity experience. It challenges your assumptions about who you are. It stretches your comfort zone. It reveals emotional habits you didn't know you had. And if you allow it, it strengthens you. The version of me who arrived here wanted a new identity. The version of me today understands that identity is not found in a location. It's built through choices. Daily choices to communicate instead of withdraw. Daily choices to contribute instead of compare. Daily choices to stay when quitting feels easier. Coming full circle. So, did moving states change me? Not in the way I expected. It didn't erase my insecurities overnight. It didn't instantly fix my marriage. It didn't automatically elevate my career. But it gave me the environment to grow intentionally. And growth, sustained over time, changes everything. Now, when I drive through this state, I don't see a risky decision. I see a chapter of courage. I see the place where my marriage deepened. I see the workplace where I rebuilt my confidence. I see the community that slowly became familiar. Most importantly, I see the version of myself who stayed through discomfort. And that's the identity I'm proud of. Not because I moved, but because I evolved. The truth about starting over: if I had to move states again, would I? After everything, the stress, the growth, the late-night doubts, the marriage tension, the career rebuilding, there's one question I get asked the most. If you could go back, would you still move to another state? For a long time, I didn't know how to answer that. Because relocating to a new state in the U.S. isn't just a practical decision. It's emotional. It shakes your identity. It tests your relationship. It challenges your confidence in ways you can't predict. But now, with distance and clarity, my answer is honest. Yes. And I would do it differently. Would I would do the same? I would still take the risk. Moving states for career growth pushed me out of professional complacency. It forced me to build credibility from zero. It sharpened my communication skills. It stretched my leadership capacity. It made me more adaptable in unfamiliar environments. If you're considering relocating for better job opportunities, know this: comfort rarely accelerates growth. Disruption does. I would also still choose to relocate with my spouse. Because as painful as some seasons were, navigating relocation stress together strengthened our marriage. We learned how to argue better, how to listen deeper, how to support each other without keeping score. Marriage after moving states is not easy, but shared adversity builds emotional depth you can't manufacture. Those lessons were worth it. What I would do differently. But here's the part people don't say enough on YouTube when they talk about starting over in a new state. I would manage my expectations differently. I expected instant clarity, instant belonging, instant confidence. When those didn't arrive, I assumed something was wrong with the state, with my decision, or with me. Now I understand adjustment takes longer than ambition wants it to. If I could advise my past self, I would say, stop expecting geography to solve internal insecurity. Stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. Stop measuring progress only by visible milestones. Relocating doesn't give you a new personality. It gives you a new context to practice growth. And growth is slow. The identity shift that matters most. At the beginning of this journey, I asked, does place change identity? Now I ask a different question. What parts of my identity become stronger in unfamiliar places? Because that's what really happened. In a new state, without old validation systems, I had to define myself from scratch. Not based on who knew me. Not based on history. Not based on reputation. But based on daily choices. That's empowering. If you're struggling with relocation anxiety or feeling lost after moving states, understand this: you're not losing yourself. You're meeting yourself without filters. And that can feel uncomfortable before it feels empowering. Career, marriage, and the courage to stay. One of the most underrated forms of courage is staying. Staying when the job feels overwhelming. Staying when marriage feels stretched. Staying when loneliness whispers that it would be easier to go back. There were moments I wanted to retreat to familiarity. Moments I fantasized about returning to the state where everything felt predictable. But if I had left too early, I would have mistaken discomfort for misalignment. That's an important distinction. If you're thinking about giving up on your move, ask yourself, am I misaligned or just uncomfortable? Growth often feels like instability before it feels like strength. In my case, staying long enough allowed confidence to compound. It allowed our marriage to stabilize. It allowed community to form. And once those roots developed, doubt lost its volume. Would I move again? Here's the surprising part. Now that I know my identity isn't dependent on location, I'm less afraid of relocation. Moving to a new state no longer feels like risking who I am. It feels like testing who I am. That's a powerful shift. Because the fear at the beginning wasn't really about the state. It was about losing certainty. And certainty is never guaranteed, no matter where you live. If another opportunity required us to relocate again, I wouldn't expect reinvention. I would expect evolution. I wouldn't chase a new identity. I would carry my grounded one with me. For anyone standing at the edge. If you're watching this because you're tired, discouraged, or questioning your decision to move states, I want you to hear something clearly. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are in transition. And transition is messy. Starting over in a new state in America will challenge your patience. It will expose insecurity. It will stretch your marriage. It will test your professional confidence. But it will also expand your capacity. You will learn how to build from zero. You will learn how to communicate under stress. You will learn that identity is portable. And once you learn that, geography loses its power over your self-worth. The real answer. So, did moving states change me? Yes. But not by replacing who I was. It changed me by forcing me to become intentional. Intentional about my marriage. Intentional about my career. Intentional about my mental resilience. And that intentionality is something I didn't have before. If I had never moved, I might still believe confidence comes from comfort. Now I know it comes from continuity, showing up consistently, even when uncertain. And that lesson? I would choose it again. The final reflection, I moved states and found myself, but not the way I expected. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, through the relocation stress, the marriage tension, the career rebuilding, the identity questions, then you already know this wasn't just about moving to a new state in the United States. It was about confronting myself. When I first packed those boxes, I believed something many of us quietly believe: a new place will create a new version of me. A stronger one. A happier one. A more confident one. I thought moving states would help me find myself. Now, years later, I understand something deeper. I didn't find a new self. I uncovered the real one. The myth of reinvention. In American culture, we romanticize starting over. We love stories about people who relocate for career opportunities, for love, for personal growth. We celebrate fresh starts and bold decisions. And yes, relocating to a new state can open doors. But what doesn't get highlighted enough on YouTube or social media is the internal work that follows the move. The late-night doubts. The quiet comparison. The loneliness of being unknown. The pressure to prove your decision was right. Moving didn't erase my insecurities. It magnified them. And that magnification was uncomfortable. But it was also clarifying. Because once I saw my fears clearly, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not belonging, I could finally address them. What moving states actually taught me. If you're asking, does place change identity? Here's my honest answer after living it. Place doesn't change identity. It exposes it. Relocating to a new state in America removed the safety net of familiarity. It stripped away the comfort of being known. It forced me to define myself without external reinforcement. And that's where growth happened. I learned that my worth is not tied to job titles. I learned that marriage requires adaptation during major transitions. I learned that confidence is built through consistency, not comfort. Most importantly, I learned that identity is portable. You carry it with you. Marriage, the quiet victory. One of the biggest transformations wasn't visible online. It happened inside our home. Relocation stress can strain even strong relationships. We faced miscommunication, exhaustion, and emotional overload. There were moments we questioned the decision. Moments when staying felt harder than leaving. But we chose to communicate instead of withdraw. We built new routines. We practiced honest check-ins. We learned to support each other without competing over sacrifice. Our marriage didn't become perfect. It became intentional. And that's better. If you're navigating marriage after moving states, remember, tension doesn't mean failure. Sometimes tension means you're growing beyond old patterns. Career, from insecurity to ownership. Professionally, starting over in a new state forced me to rebuild credibility. I had to prove myself again. I had to speak up in unfamiliar rooms. I had to earn trust without history. At first, that felt humiliating. But over time, it became empowering. There's something deeply strengthening about knowing you can rebuild from zero. That you can adapt. That you can learn new systems, new cultures, new expectations, and still contribute meaningfully. If you're relocating for career growth in the U.S., understand this. The first phase is discomfort. The second phase is clarity. The third phase is ownership. Ownership is when you stop seeking validation and start trusting your preparation. That shift changes everything. For anyone who feels lost right now. If you're watching this because you're exhausted in your new state, questioning your move, or wondering if you made a mistake, pause. Feeling lost after relocation is normal. Missing your old life is normal. Struggling in your relationship during transition is normal. You are not weak for finding it hard. Starting over requires emotional endurance. But here's what I want you to remember. You don't need a new location to become worthy. You don't need a new address to validate your identity. You don't need immediate success to justify your courage. Growth is happening, even when it's quiet. So, did I find myself? Yes. But not because the state changed me. I found myself because I stopped running from discomfort. I found myself because I faced insecurity instead of hiding it. I found myself because I chose growth over retreat. Moving states didn't give me a new personality. It gave me perspective. It showed me that who I am is not fragile. It can survive uncertainty. It can evolve under pressure. It can build connection in unfamiliar places. And that realization feels more powerful than any external achievement. The message I want to leave you with. If you're considering relocating to another state in America, or you're already in the middle of rebuilding your life, here's my final truth. A new place will not automatically change your identity. But it will give you the opportunity to become more intentional about it. You can choose resentment or resilience. You can choose avoidance or communication. You can choose comparison or growth. The state is just the setting. You are the decision maker. I moved states and thought I was searching for a new version of myself. What I discovered instead was this. I was never lost. I was just untested. And once I was tested, I became stronger, not because I changed locations, but because I changed my response. That's the real story. And if you're in your own transition right now, maybe this isn't the chapter where you fall apart. Maybe it's the chapter where you finally see who you've been capable of becoming all along. If you've made it to the end of this story, I want you to pause for a second. Because this was never just about moving to a new state in the United States. It was never just about career growth, marriage after relocation, or starting over in a new place. It was about identity under pressure. I moved states thinking I would find a better version of myself. What I actually found was the truth about who I already was, when comfort disappeared, when certainty faded, when nothing felt familiar. And here's the part that still gives me chills. The hardest season of my relocation journey became the foundation of my confidence. Not the promotion. Not the new address. Not the social validation. The struggle. So before you decide that your move was a mistake. Before you decide your marriage can't survive the transition. Before you decide you're not strong enough to start over in a new state. Ask yourself this. What if this isn't the chapter where you're failing? What if this is the chapter where you're being built? Because sometimes, the reason a new place feels uncomfortable isn't because you don't belong. It's because you're expanding. And expansion stretches. If this story resonated with you, if you're navigating relocation stress, rebuilding your marriage, chasing career growth in America, or questioning your identity after a big life transition, this channel is for you. Here, we don't romanticize moving states. We don't pretend growth is easy. We tell the real stories behind starting over. In the next video, I'm going deeper into something even more personal, the one conversation that almost made us move back, and what changed our decision completely. You won't want to miss that. If you believe growth is messy but worth it, subscribe to the channel. If you're in the middle of rebuilding your life in a new state, comment "I'm growing." If you're standing at the edge of a big decision, share this with someone who needs courage right now. Because you are not alone in this. Moving may change your address, but choosing resilience changes your life. And this? This is only the beginning of the story.